Okay. Everyone see my screen?
We see your screen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, in addition to what Savina mentioned, I just want to echo that I have had the privilege of working at Cancer Treatment Centers of America for over 20 years now, sharing people's journey through cancer treatment. I'm working in the Integrative Oncology program, which provides a number of supportive services to help individuals manage side effects, help with quality of life, while they're having treatment under one roof where everybody communicates with one another. In the case of nutrition, there is certainly some evidence that staying well nourished during treatment also helps with outcomes, certainly with surgical outcomes, but also in individuals' ability to continue their treatment on schedule without interruptions and without dose reductions. So it's been truly a pleasure, and being able to do these types of events are always fun for me as well. So what I thought we'd do this evening is we'll start with, which hopefully introduces why some of the things we'll prepare later, why I've chosen those. But we'll talk a little bit about high-level nutrition goals during cancer treatment, and then a little bit about high-level diet recommendations. And when I say high-level, I mean population recommendations, because certainly everyone's needs are very individual and need to be personalized during cancer treatment. So we'll talk at a very high level, and I'll try and, as I go through things, discuss, when things may need to be modified. Some of the recipes I'm going to actually modify tonight, really with the intent of communicating that recipes are just a guideline, and learning to play with them. Actually, sometimes you find some new favorites, and I have some unique nutrition needs myself, and so I'm going to leave some things out so that I can actually eat some of the snacks we're going to make later. But I'll point that out as we go along, and we'll talk a little bit about body weight, being physically active, and then what does a plant-focused diet mean, which is what all the organizations recommend now, both for cancer prevention during treatment and in survivorship. And then we'll just take a little break if you want to stretch, if you need to get a drink of water, even if you need to make a quick bio break, while I move the computer a little bit and bring some of the food more into focus as we go through the demo. And as Savina mentioned, before I do that, we'll do Q&A, and then we'll do a Q&A after the demo as well, if there's any questions about what we're preparing. I'm a pretty simple cook, so I'm using simple ingredients. And actually, part of this we'll talk a little bit later too. Some of the recipes were chosen based on a blog we did at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, looking at more people are home, eating at home, trying to minimize trips to the grocery store. What are some recipes, things you can try with things you may have in your pantry or in your refrigerator? There's some good things that were, from a food standpoint, that are coming out of this. People are wasting a lot less food. So that kind of gives a little background into some of the recipes we're going to cover. They're going to be snacks because there's some survey data coming out showing people are snacking more the last few months, which makes sense. We're home, we're working from home, and so our kitchens are closer. So we'll talk a little bit about potentially making your own snacks with things you may have on hand to reduce potentially trips to the grocery store. So what are some of the nutrition goals during cancer treatment? First and foremost, really making sure individuals achieve and maintain a healthy body weight. And there we're really referring to maintaining lean body mass, the appropriate amount of lean body mass. It's important for physical function, but this is also the metabolically active tissue in our bodies that helps us break down medications, drugs. So having the right amount of body mass can potentially help with side effects. Can also help with number 6, you see there, supporting immune function and lowering risk of infection. If individuals are losing body mass, it doesn't take much body mass to be lost to actually impair the immune system, immune function, and potentially increase risk of infection. So there's a lot of reasons we need to be concerned with body mass during cancer treatment. So what that looks like, again, is individualized and personalized, but for some, it means avoiding or reversing unintentional weight loss. So weight that may be lost without trying. So that individual's needs is going to look very different from someone at the following point that may need to avoid weight gain, or potentially even start or try to lose some weight with a healthy diet and activity during treatment, with the caveat that, of course, it always needs to be approved by one's oncologist. So that is not something we ever recommend unless the individual's oncologist is supportive in recommending it. Secondly, addressing nutrient deficiencies. So the first one, weight, that if somebody's losing weight, that can be a deficiency of calories, protein, essential fats, but individuals may also have vitamin and mineral deficiencies that need to be addressed. Supporting the gut microbiome and digestive health. So we are learning more and more about the thousands or maybe more different bacteria we have living in our gut and our digestive tract. And there is evidence coming out that the more diverse, the more of that good bacteria you have in your gut, that potentially can influence response to immunotherapy, for example. So that we're going to learn more and more about that and the role it plays in cancer treatment. Of course, helping with quality of life. I think I mentioned side effects. I did talk about the impact of lean body mass on immune function, and then, supporting healing and recovery after surgery. So how do we do that? Ideally, we try and do that with a plant-based or plant-forward diet as much as possible. There are times when that needs to be modified because we are more concerned, if it's somebody losing weight, we are more concerned with calories and protein than potentially quality of where they're coming from for the moment. But for most individuals, we can work within a plant-based diet, lower in saturated trans fat, essentially some of our animal fats, lower in simple sugars, and of course higher in vegetables, fruits, and unrefined grains. So this for me is always a little fun because I've been in this field for 30 plus years, and recommendations have changed since I went to school, which I think is a good thing because I always like to use this as a reminder that nutrition is a science like any other science, and the more and the longer we study things, the more we learn. So on the left is something that was in Time magazine in 1984, basically, talking about eggs and bacon, and they're off the menu for breakfast because they're too high in cholesterol, which may increase the risk of heart disease. And there's still some truth to that. But then you look at the right side, 30 years later, same magazine actually was recommending butter, which isn't exactly what the new literature had suggested, but it did tell us that when we told people to, eat less saturated fat and cholesterol, some of the recommendations and what some people did was substituted, basically lowered that and then started eating more refined grains and sugars. And we learned that that was equally, if not worse, for potentially raising the risk of heart disease. So again, I think it's good to point out because we see, different diets come and go. I've seen some diets come and go several times over the last 30 years. So it's, not necessarily, fat's bad, carbohydrates bad. It's often the type of fat, the type of carbohydrate, and the amount. But I say that to recognize that things change, and I'm going to talk at the highest level where there is consensus in this area. So, what do all the recommendations we have as it relates to cancer prevention, treatment, and survivorship have in common? Any organization we look at, I mentioned achieving and maintaining a healthy body weight. We now know that, certainly having extra body weight can affect cancer treatment outcomes. It also increases the risk of at least 13 different cancers, risk of recurrence, risk of another cancer, and then risk of other chronic diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So that is, always at the top of the list. Being physically active, and we'll break each of these down in a little more detail. Limiting calories from added sugars, and our newest guidelines are a little more specific about sugar, which is wonderful. Saturated fats and reducing sodium from most. And then shifting the emphasis from red meat to more plant-based foods, ideally using things like fish and beans as priority proteins when possible. Smoking, I think everybody has gotten that message, and then using caution with alcohol, if at all. So I'm going to talk primarily about the first four, not so much smoking and alcohol. So the American Institute for Cancer Research is one of those not-for-profit whose main mission is to study the role of diet and lifestyle in cancer prevention, treatment, and survivorship. And they have put out 3 expert reports over the last 3 decades. Really, every 10 years, they comb through all the literature and put out recommendations. It's usually a top 10 list like this. These are the most recent from 2018. You see weight there again, physical activity, plant-based diet, limiting consumption of fast foods, processed foods. This is primarily the impact those foods have on body weight. We all know we have an obesity essentially epidemic in this country, and More and more people eat meals away from home, although the last few months that has changed. More people are eating at home, cooking at home, eating more fruits and vegetables, wasting less. So that is at least one, I guess, positive thing that's come out of people being home more. Limiting consumption of red meats and processed meats, limit consumption of sugar sweetened drinks, and we'll go into that in more detail. And I mentioned alcohol. And then number 10 there, really, the American Institute for Cancer Research, the American Cancer Society, all say these guidelines, if you can follow them during cancer treatment, this is what is recommended. So what do we mean by achieve and maintain a healthy body weight? There are a couple different ways to screen for this, and none of them are perfect. I mean, really the best way is to be able to measure your body composition and see what's lean and what's fat. But the best tools we have are also based on the literature. So when we say carrying extra body weight or being in the obese classification increases risk of many cancers and other chronic diseases, those studies, that association is actually based on what you see here, body mass index. So it's really just a crude measure of height and weight. And so, it doesn't take gender into account. It doesn't take somebody who is a football player and has more muscle, or, somebody who's less muscled, but it is the tool we have, and it is what the literature is based on. So you can pretty much go to any search engine and pull up a body mass indicator calculator, put in your height and weight. So here I just put in somebody who's 6 feet tall, weighs 211 pounds. And you see at the bottom, it gives you a calculated BMI, in this case, 28.7, which would put this individual in the overweight category. So ideally, we want to be in that 18.5 to 29.9 range. Being under is not necessarily healthy and associated with risk, and being over is usually something to discuss with either your primary care physician or oncologist. And I think the good news is, there is some literature that even losing 5% of body weight, even if it doesn't necessarily put you in, the normal weight category, lowers a lot of the markers in our blood that is associated with risk, like insulin, like growth factor, hormones that are associated with hormone-related cancers. And then another way is to actually measure waist circumference. So measuring your waist, in the midsection right above the hips with a measuring tape. And over 35 for women is associated with carrying extra body fat, extra weight, and over 40 for men. So again, these are tools we use, and most physicians now incorporate this into physicals as well. So how much physical activity? Again, this is equally important, and this is actually based on the American Cancer Society's recommendations that just came out a week ago. So there's been a little bit of a change. It used to be 150 minutes of moderate activity and 75 of intense activity per week for overall health. Now you see that's actually the lower end, and the recommendation is if you can do more, in this case, almost twice as much is better. The National Weight Control Registry, which collects data on thousands of people who have lost weight and kept it off successfully, has found about 60 minutes a day is associated with most success. But again, if you haven't been active, which many Americans haven't been, it's important to work up to it. It's important to discuss it with your physician. And then once you get there, potentially adding strength training, which can help build muscle mass. We talked about maintaining muscle mass, and I didn't give anything specific. The things you can do with diet and activity for muscle mass are to try and eat 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, or if you need to get it in a supplemental form, and then strength training or activity using the muscles. And then flexibility and balance work is also good as we get older, just from a standpoint of risk of falls. So when we talk about plant-based foods, I mean, again, we've all heard this over and over, but it really means eating more foods without labels, shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. So eating more fruits and vegetables, eating more fish ideally, and I'll talk more specifically about fish. And there are a couple reasons why this plant-forward approach or plant-forward recommendation is, one is these types of food actually potentially affect cancer risk and risk of recurrence or, a second cancer by influencing body weight. So these foods are actually lower calories. They keep us full. They have more fiber, so they may keep us full. We eat less. So this type of eating has been associated with making it easier to achieve and maintain a healthier body weight. And then secondary, things like fruits and vegetables and some of these other plant foods, particularly when you get a variety of different colors, the more color, the more of these nutrients and phytochemicals in them. By eating these foods and getting the fiber, the vitamins, the minerals, the plant chemicals or phytochemicals that have biological activity at the cellular level, but not necessarily a vitamin and mineral and antioxidants, these foods may actually protect the DNA or the genetic material in our cells and keep our cells healthy. So there's indirect reasons from a weight standpoint and direct reasons to eat more of these plant-based foods. So usually when we talk about this, then, one of the next questions is, does it have to be organic? Meaning not irradiated, no GMOs, synthetic pesticides, et cetera. And I always like to remind people that you also have, exposure to some of these compounds with animal foods. So the less animal foods you eat, the more you limit your exposure that way as well. But if you're not familiar, the Environmental Work Group at EWG.org puts out a list every year of the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are the fruits and vegetables with the highest pesticide residues on them. And these are ones where you may want to consider buying organic if your budget permits and it's available to you. I think it's also important to remember, we deal with people who have a very limited, sometimes, food budget, and this is, just another stress. And we remind people by washing, by trimming the outer leaves of greens and eating a variety of produce, you minimize your exposure as well. But the Dirty Dozen are where it may make sense to spend extra money. So you see the list here, berries, some of the greens. So you'll have the slides for the list there, and EWG.org is a good resource for this and many other food-related questions. And then the Clean 15, those with the lowest pesticide residues where it may be fine to purchase conventional. And again, this is always a very personal decision based on a number of different factors in individuals' lives. So the current recommendation from the American Institute of Cancer Research is to try and limit consumption of red meats, or at least work towards 12 to 18 ounces per week. So maybe that's a 3 to 4 ounce portion, 4 or 5 times a week. And so one way to do that is to consider using smaller portions of meat as more of a garnish and not necessarily the focus of the meal. So we're going to talk a little bit more, in a minute about stir fries, fajitas, salads, where a little bit of meat goes a long way, and then trying to go meatless. Some people start with meatless Mondays once a week and building up to it as your digestive tract adjusts and can tolerate it. But again, there are individuals who may have an obstruction in the digestive tract or side effects where beans aren't necessarily a good thing. So this is all, again, high level, and that's what we do with patients, is really individualize this based on their needs. But beans, we'll talk about soups and stews. Those are an easy way to incorporate beans into the diet. Poultry instead of red meat, trying to limit processed meats, and then eating fish 2 to 3 times a week for the omega-3 fatty acids, the good fats that have anti-inflammatory properties and may be protective from a heart health standpoint. So when we say fish, the types of fish we're talking about are the deep cold water ocean fish that have those omega-3 fatty acids, the good fats in them. And so you see here, that's things like cod, salmon, tuna. I just had halibut last week for the first time in a long time. And then, of course, I think I read it's a little overfished, so I felt guilty, but it tasted really good. And I'm going to talk about a resource for that as well. Actually, the Environmental Working Group has a good resource about fish too, and sustainability and what are the best choices from that standpoint. But generally, the current recommendation is 3 to 4 ounces of these types of fish twice a week. And this is, often the question we get is, what about mercury if I'm going to eat more fish? And so generally, the way we make sure we're not getting exposed to too much mercury is to keep the portion at 4 ounces for adults and smaller portions for children. Some of the lower choices can be eaten that 2 to 3 times a week. And it's all the ones I mentioned that are the best sources of omega-3 fatty acids: cod, salmon, tuna. The moderate choices are recommended once a week. So you see things like grouper, halibut, other types of tuna. And then some of the ones there with highest mercury content. And, these are ones I don't, other than maybe orange roughy, I don't see people eating too often anyhow. And then that resource there, Fish Advisory Online from the Environmental Protection Agency, if you fish yourself or people in your family or friends fish freshwater and bring fish, this is a good resource to let you know if any of the fish that they might be catching have mercury warnings on them or advisories not to eat them. So talking about sugar, I mentioned some of the new guidelines are very specific about sugar, and the most specific guidelines we have regarding added sugar is from the American Heart Association for heart health. So the current population guidelines for sugar are 10% of calories, which if you eat a 2,000 calorie diet, that's about 50 grams a day. You see here for heart health, the recommendation is 6 teaspoons or 24 grams for women and 9 teaspoons and 36 grams for men. So that may sound like a lot, but when you look at what the average American consumes at 22 teaspoons a day and 89 grams of sugar, most people have room for improvement. And a lot of times we're getting sugar in our diet and we may not even be aware of that we're getting it or how much. So I just put this here as a reminder, what are added sugars? And it's really anything that's added to food during the processing or at the table. So it's not naturally occurring sugars. When you don't count naturally occurring sugars from fruits or even the sugar that's in milk or plain yogurt towards that added sugar, but it's things like you see here. The number one source of added sugars in the American diet is drinks, sodas, sport drinks, etc., followed by the obvious things we know have sugar in them: candies, pastries, desserts, baked goods. But I think the third most common source is the one where people don't necessarily even know it's sneaking in, and that's condiments. Tomato sauce, ketchup, salad dressing, any number of condiments have sugar added to them. And there are options, brands that don't have sugar, and that's an easy way to cut down on sugar. I mean, I have a sweet tooth, so if I'm going to get my 24 grams of sugar, I want to get it from somewhere I'm noticing and not, in my tomato sauce or ketchup. But most people aren't aware how it creeps in with condiments. This is just an example. There's at least 50 to 100 different names for sugars or added sugars, and these are the types of sugars added in food, in processing or at the table that we're referring to when we say try and limit your added sugars. The labels are getting better at helping us with this. So just this year, hopefully if you look at labels, you're starting to see changes in the labels and that actually show how much is added sugar in a product. So the one on the left, if you look, you'll see it has 37 grams of carbohydrate per serving, 1 gram of sugar, but it doesn't tell you if that's a naturally occurring sugar or an added sugar. Yogurt's a good example of this. If you look at yogurt, even plain yogurt, you'll see 12 grams of sugar per serving. And, many times I'll have people say, well, I can't eat yogurt because that's half my added sugar a day. That's naturally occurring sugar. However, sweetened yogurt will have both the natural sugar and the added sugar. So what you'll start seeing is the one on the right here, where it's very specific. If you see where the arrow is pointing, this particular product has 10 grams of added sugar. And those are the ones you want to limit to 10% of calories and, probably somewhere between 25 and 50 grams a day. Many people are fine, but the majority of people have room to improve with sugar. So this is just an example how quickly it adds up, and beverages being the main source. So any number of these, soda, sweet tea, these coffee drinks that are on every street corner in some cities, one of those a day, pretty much you meet or exceed your limit for added sugars a day. So if that's where you want to get it from, it's just a reminder to be careful with everything else in the diet for the rest of the day. So some of the things, from a beverage thing, the obvious things are to drink more water. There are unsweetened versions of vitamin waters that are sweetened with stevia, unsweetened teas. So trying to do more of your unsweetened water, tea type beverages. The other thing is to buy unsweetened products. I mentioned yogurt and sweeten them yourself. So plain yogurt has 12 grams of naturally occurring sugar. But if you look at a sweetened yogurt brand, it can easily have 26 and up grams of sugar, where 14 of that is added. So if you buy plain yourself and just add, for example, a teaspoon of a sweetener, you're saving 10 grams of sugar that way. Or if you just add fruit, if that's sweet enough for you, you're not adding any added sugar. So again, just to summarize, what are the types of things in general that are best to eat during cancer treatment? Again, recognizing everyone has individual needs, is as many plant foods as possible, as tolerated based on your individual condition. Trying to emphasize foods high in nutrient density that you need to maintain lean body mass, immune health, so protein, healthy fats, and then some of the fruits and vegetables for vitamins and minerals. If you can eat fiber, actually, these types of foods are the ones that lead to the most diversity of good bacteria in our gut. When I mentioned how that may influence response to immunotherapy, for example, these foods all help maintain a healthy digestive tract more than any other foods or animal type diets. In fact, there have been studies that have shown, where individuals follow a plant-based diet for a day and have this wonderful gut diversity, and within 24 hours of going back to eating animal foods, it changes in a very not health-promoting way. And eating more fish if possible, and less sugar for most people, and sodium for some. So this is where I was thinking we could take, if you need to stretch or get water, go to the bathroom, and I'm just going to move things. Well, I guess I could talk through some of these recipes, and then I'll move the computer a little bit, and we'll do a little demo of a few snacks that you can make at home. This link you see there, that is a link to the blog I mentioned that a team of people did at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, just looking at COVID, and in what now surveys are showing us, more people are at home. 60% of people are cooking at home, eating more fruits and vegetables, wasting less food. But as I mentioned, they're snacking more. And so, snacking is a way we can also try and incorporate some of these healthy foods and maybe use things we have in our pantry, cabinets, cupboards, and refrigerator. So I'm going to do the granola, the popsicles, and the icebox oatmeal. I'll talk a little bit about smoothies, since I have the blender and a lot of ingredients for smoothies on the counter here. But I want to point out a few things that were in that blog. So, a vegetable omelet is a very easy thing if you have eggs at home and any kind of vegetables to throw together. So there's a recipe in that blog, and we can certainly provide them as well for a veggie omelet. But again, that's just a guideline. So I can tell you, we're using things, we're throwing very little away, and whatever we have, we throw into an omelet at times for breakfast, or there's no reason you can't have an omelet for lunch or dinner. Have that be your main entree, your protein source for a meal. Soups and stews are wonderful because that's an easy way. If you have a recipe as a base, you can leave things out, like the minestrone soup recipe in this blog. I often leave a lot of things out and just throw in whatever vegetables I have in my refrigerator that maybe I'm not going to use in another way. With summer, the vegetables we use in like a minestrone soup are very different than what we might use in the winter. But it can be vegetarian. If you like chicken broth, add chicken broth. Any beans, so I often, if I, just whatever beans I have, I'll throw in a minestrone. You can use pasta, gluten-free pasta, leave the pasta out. Same thing with a stew. I don't know about you, but we've been eating a lot of stir fries the last few months. So again, it's whatever protein source we may have. It could be chicken, it could be shrimp and other fish. If you do tofu, it could be tofu. And then it's whatever vegetables we want to work into there that we may not be cooking in another way, or maybe getting close to extending their useful life, if you will. So with that, I will, if you want to stretch, get some water, or even if you need to run to the restroom, I'm just going to do a little moving around of the computer, pull some food into the screen, and we'll start with making some homemade granola.
Sounds great.
Okay. And you're all going to let me know. Oh, let me look for questions first. Yeah.
Right. While Carol is if anyone has questions, feel free to submit them through the chat, or if you prefer, you can unmute yourself and ask or talk if you're having a hard time with the chat. So now is a great time for that option. And Carolyn, you will have to stop sharing your screen so that we can see you full screen whenever you're ready.
Yep. So see, stop sharing. There we go. Can you see in the screen now?
Can you lower your screen a little bit?
Lower? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's good? Okay. Now I'm going to pull up the recipes, even though these are pretty easy and I shouldn't need them. Okay. Is everybody back? We went to the...
Is the slow cooker stew recipe in the blog?
It is. It is. Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't highlight that one too much. I don't know how much people do stews in the summer, but yeah, absolutely. Throw it that as a base and throw any number of things in it. Take things out. I tend to use that one a little bit more in the colder weather, but yeah, that is absolutely in the blog as well.
And just a reminder for those of you that joined us late, we will be sending out an email with the PowerPoint along with the recipes that Carolyn highlights today. So we'll look forward to those in the next day or two.
I did prepping and portioning ahead of time, so to make this as simple as possible. Okay, so with the homemade granola, again, so this was something often people have rolled oats at home and some of these other limited ingredients. So it's easy to make as a snack and perhaps minimize trips to the grocery store. I know many people tell me that that's what they'll run out of before maybe some of the staples is snacky type foods, and they're running to the store for that. So granola is a pretty versatile snack, and we'll talk about maybe different ways to use it. But basically, all I'm doing here is taking, as you see, there are 2.5 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats, not quick cooking, and putting them in a bowl. And I mentioned I was going to modify because, again, recipes are just a guideline, and you play with them and learn what you want to take out, what you want to put in. I'm actually going to leave the sunflower seeds and almonds out, although particularly almonds are almost essential in granola. But as I mentioned, right now I can't eat those types of things, and since I'm going to enjoy this granola after we make it, I'm not going to put them in here. But here's where you'd put sunflower seeds, almonds, or again, any types of seeds, any type of nuts. The main thing with granola, if you haven't made it, is if you're substituting, still trying to keep the ratio of dry ingredients and wet ingredients the same so that it holds together. But other than that, there's no rules. I'm going to leave the coconut out as well. And then basically just going to add some cinnamon, nutmeg, and a little bit of salt to balance out the sweetness and perhaps maybe help it last a little bit longer. And then we're going to add the vanilla. And then you can use honey, maple syrup, agave. I mean, you can really use any kind of sweetener here. And this is going to make a number of portions, so you'll stay within your added sugar guideline. But what I'm using today is pure Vermont maple syrup. This is actually syrup from a friend's tree in Vermont. So compared to the honey I had at home, this seemed like a better choice. But I know some people don't like the taste of maple syrup, so whichever sweetener you like. And then I'm going to leave the raisins and cranberries out too, but that's where you would add these. So if you can't tell, I'm on a little bit of a bland diet these days. So again, as I mentioned, understanding needs change, but at least I'm going to get some whole grains here, some fiber from the oats. And then the other thing that's not in the recipe that I often do is add an egg or an egg white just to help bind it and hold it together. And granola is a very personal thing too. Some people like granola very chunky. Some people like it actually looser. But if you want to try and hold it together, I'm going to add an egg. Let's just add an egg white, if I can separate this here. And similarly, when you cook it, if you stir it, you'll have a more crumbly granola, whereas if you sort of leave it cook and just watch that it doesn't burn for the 30 minutes at 350, you may actually even be able to get a granola bar or more clusters.
Carolyn, what else would you recommend to bind it other than an egg?
Thank you for that question. Actually, one thing that works really well are chia seeds. So, if you have chia seeds at home, if you like chia seeds, you could put those in here because they will soak up some of the liquid from the sweetener, the maple syrup or the honey or whatever sweetener you use. So chia is really one of the better binders, and also is adding, the benefits of the chia seeds as well. A little bit of calcium, a little bit of omega-3s. So we're just, see how easy this is? We're just mixing it up. And then basically going to put it on so you hopefully have your oven preheated at 350. And then you're basically going to just put this on a cookie sheet. Some of that later. And just spread it out. And again, you're going to put it in the oven for 30 minutes. If you like it more in bars or clusters, don't stir it and just kind of watch it so that it doesn't burn. If you like it where you're going to, so I would recommend that if you're going to just snack on granola and you like it that way. If you're going to use the granola and maybe sprinkle it on yogurt or fruit, or even add it to a smoothie, on top of the smoothie, then you might want to stir it so you have a more crumbly granola. So once you have that spread out, I'm going to do like the magic as if we're on a TV cooking show. I'm going to walk over as if I'm putting this in my 350-degree oven for 30 minutes. And come back with some that I made already. So I don't know if you can see that, but I stirred it. So I have kind of a crumbly granola that I can either snack on as is or add to yogurt, fruit, on top of a smoothie, anything else I may want to sprinkle a little granola on. So it's as simple as that. Any questions about that? Okay. Just gonna cheat on my recipe. So, it is getting warmer out, and, one of the things we tend to do a lot of frozen icy things in the summertime. And so rather than running out to the store to get whatever type of frozen treat it might be, it's actually pretty easy to make your own popsicles. So again, here we're going to make popsicles with any types of fruit you have at home. So you're going to get some servings of fruit. We're going to add a little, in this case, vanilla yogurt, but you could certainly use plain yogurt. Everybody likes things a different sweetness, and depending upon where else you're getting added sugars. So you're getting some protein and probiotics with the yogurt. And we're going to use orange juice and honey here. But again, this could be literally any type of fruit you have at home, peaches, watermelon. I mean, there's just really no rules there. Instead of orange juice, you can use any other kind of juice. You could use coconut water, unsweetened coconut milk. So really, there's no rules when it comes to this. Almost anything you put in here in the freezer for a few hours is going to freeze. So we'll start with adding the strawberries, which I've prepped already to the blender. Hopefully everything's going to fit in here. And some blackberries. And again, here's another substitution. The blueberries didn't look good at the store, so I'm not putting blueberries in here. No rules. I'm going to actually leave a little bit out. think I may have mismeasured. We'll leave those strawberries. Okay. And then we're going to add the yogurt. And I know there's 2 cups in here because I used the remainder for something else. So I'm going to pour it in here and not worry about measuring. So that's your yogurt. And again, this is cow's milk yogurt, but you could use coconut milk yogurt. I mean, any number of substitutes. And then we're going to add a little orange juice, but again, that could be any kind of juice, coconut milk, coconut water, and a tablespoon of honey. This is a ½ tablespoon measure, so I'll do 2. But again, this is to taste as well. And that's really all there is to that. And then I'm going to blend. So I know, Savina, you were going to maybe put us on mute for a little bit.
All set.
Okay. Now we've got this nice colorful liquid that we're going to add to popsicle forms if you have them, but you could also use ice cube trays. Ice cube trays are kind of nice because if you don't want to eat them as a frozen dessert, if you will, you can take, after this freezes, you can take it out and put it in a blender and just add a little more liquid and make a smoothie in the morning or any type of day. But you're basically just going to pour this into the popsicle molds. I won't make all 12, but these are nice because they have little sticks. And then basically they just go in the freezer for at least 3 hours. And then kind of twist them, pull them out, and enjoy them. I have some that I made ahead with a different form to show you. If you have, ice cube, these are the silicone, the food grade, food silicone, both the molds and the trays. You can actually, if you want to put a toothpick or put them in a tray like this, and sort of a weird popsicle with a toothpick, but sometimes we'll just put this in a bowl and enjoy it as a frozen dessert. Or again, as I mentioned, let's say you're getting up in the morning, you can pop one of these out of the tray. So now, because remember, you've got fruit in here, you've got yogurt in here, anything else you may have added, a little juice, and you can put that in the blender and make your smoothie in the morning. Save a few minutes. So any questions about that one? Okay. And then this one is, as long as I have oatmeal off or rolled oats out, I thought we'd do this one quickly. So you might be, let's say you got a little time, you're making some granola, some popsicles, making some homemade snacks. You can basically make breakfast for tomorrow or, for a couple days, the next couple days by taking, 1/4 cup or so of old-fashioned rolled oats, adding 1/3 of a cup of, any type of milk substitute will work. A little bit of yogurt again. And here's where you could add the chia seeds as well. Nice binder for granola, but they go very well in here. And then if you wanted to add some sweetener, a couple teaspoons of honey. I've done it without honey, it's just fine. Especially if you add some nice ripe fruit. And then some berries. Should have probably put this in a bigger bowl, but usually this works. And then basically just mix that up. And if you have a jar, some people do this in a jar, put the top on and shake it all up in a glass jar. And then you can just put it in the refrigerator overnight. All kind of softens the rolled oats and gets nice and thick and makes a nice breakfast cereal in the morning. So I'm gonna put this in here for tomorrow morning. And again, you can experiment with all different things there too. I personally never experimented with different grains, but certainly all kinds of milk and milk alternatives, yogurt alternatives. I did put chia seeds in today. It definitely is better with the chia seeds in there because it does, like it would in a granola, it kind of helps it all gel up and makes a nice cereal, nice cold oatmeal, if you will. So those were again, addressing what we're seeing, that people are snacking more and often saying that causes them to make extra trips to the grocery store, when many times people have ingredients at home to make their own healthy snacks. These are just a few additional resources when we talk about nutrition during cancer treatment. Cancer Wellness Center, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has some good consumer resources as well. If you're looking for a dietitian outside of what you may have access to, they have Find a Dietitian on there. The American Institute for Cancer Research, I talked about their guidelines today. The National Cancer Institute and the American Cancer Society, just to name a few. And of course, we're at cancercenter.com, and that's where that blog is with some of those additional recipes that I didn't do today, just because I have a little limited space to work with, and my oven is over there. So if I were doing some of those, I'd be cooking with my back to you. So, although I could have gotten the crock pot out, so I'll do that next time. So that is what I had. You see if there are some questions coming in.